Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. It's Wednesday. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by John Hughes and Patrick McGilp. We're here to talk all things Celtic. Got a big game tonight, Patrick. Next 14, we've got to win every single one of them by the looks of it.
Yeah, I think so. And, believe it or not, we're talking in the chat, and you can actually end up with 100 points if you win all 14 games, which, I thought that would have been well out of sight, but it shows we've not been that bad in accumulating points this season. I'm maybe a bit of a pessimist or a bit of a realist or whatever you want to call it. I would always take a draw at Ibrox, so I would be happy with the 98 points myself. I don't think a team's ever lost a league on 98 points, but I think we do need to win every game up until Ibrox. I mean, you look at how we've picked up points since the beginning of December, since that Motherwell draw at Parkhead, the header, and you sort of look at the fixtures and you think, apart from Hearts away, there's not a lot of tricky games in there before we go to Ibrox in early April. So I think we do really need to go on a win and run the next 7 games and pick up as many points as possible, because we've been far too inconsistent of late.
Inconsistency. John, we talk about optimism, pessimism. I think if you've had conversations within the Acsom chat group, you know that we've got a sprinkling of both in our ranks, haven't we, John? Where are you sitting at the moment when it comes to optimism, pessimism, realism?
Well, I'd just like to ask Patrick what he thinks constitutes a tricky game at the moment. Is it like every single game?
Yeah. Motherwell didn't find Ross County tricky last night, did they?
No,
but we did.
No.
We made it tricky.
No, well, we've dropped points against basically everyone, especially the bottom. All the worst teams we've dropped points against.
Yeah.
Well, for clarification, I'll say that Hearts away was a tricky game, and the rest of them, most seasons you like to think you'd be able to win those games, but I suppose you're right. Every game's a tricky game at the moment, the way that the momentum's going,
Yeah, no, I mean, you're reaching into your tabloid vocabulary bag here, aren't you? It's 14 cup finals, so essentially. But I mean, that's really what it is for us. But I mean, that's what it was last week, and we still didn't pull it out of the bag. Or Saturday, we still didn't pull it out of the bag. So the players have to be aware of this. There appears to be within the group, given who we're dropping points against, it seems to illustrate there's a definite issue with mentality. They can get up for the bigger games, the more difficult games, the more challenging games, and games that are going to be difficult, whether it's freezing or it's raining or it's unpleasant wee ground or whatever it is. There appears to be a lack of ability to dig in, to grit it out, and I was glad we came back from 1-0 down, because there's been plenty of times this season where I didn't think we would. I didn't think we looked as if we could come back. I didn't think we'd go on and win the game. We might have done, but we've shown real no indication of being able to come back from a deficit and go on and score a couple. We have not been free scoring. We don't look free scoring. That leads on to a whole host of other issues with the formation and so on. So, I think every one of these games is going to be tricky and not anything to do with the opposition. If we were playing as we should be playing with that squad, potentially we'd blow them all away. But, that's not the reality of this season. Guys have been off form. The formation hasn't been right, in my view. And the combination of factors there has just led us to the position we're in just now, where the momentum is definitely with the other side of the city at the moment. So it's deeply, deeply depressing as that is to say. I'm afraid that's just the way it stands at the moment. But I mean, we can change that momentum. That's the thing about momentum; it can change. So we can change that, get on a decent run, put in some decent performances, smash a few people. They can knock in 4s and 5s, and then we'll see where we are at that point. But I think given the way we're playing, there's no doubt they're all tricky.
Yeah, this is the thing, John. I mean, I remember under Here It Goes, the big klaxon Ange Postecoglou, and Tony Haggerty, a former Acsom favourite who you can tune into for his views on Celtic elsewhere. And I remember he coined the phrase, didn't he? It was the rip-roaring, free-scoring, never boring. And for a couple of years there, we were, Patrick. We absolutely were that side. We were the very epitome of that. And, Tony goes on about where he heard that. He heard it in a boozer somewhere. He'll remember the name of the barman who actually coined the phrase. But we absolutely were. We were that team. And there's been a real drop down in terms of the way that we play, the style of football, the tempo, the excitement, all that kind of stuff isn't there at the moment. And again, I go back to, we're talking about mentality. We've also got here, my ball. The reason I'm going down this road here is because my ball says it's a lack of team spirit. This is a Celtic side that we can always go back to and say, right, we've just won the treble. But is it? Because there's players missing from that side, not only the ones that have been transferred, but the ones who are injured, Patrick. And then you've got a clutch of guys who have come in who may not have the same spirit, the same mentality, the same kind of winning approach when it comes to Celtic. I think Scottish football, when it comes to Celtic and Rangers in the past, a lot of big name players have come up and been shocked at the demands of playing for one half of the, what would you call it in the past, the old firm. It's no longer called that, of course. Celtic or Rangers, you need to have a certain level, a certain mentality to win every game. Brendan Rodgers has been talking about it this week, and he says, it's no surprise to me. I know what's required. But I think it's now time for him to show it, Patrick, because I've seen a different side to him this season, one that isn't really firing on all cylinders, Brendan. And I think he needs to lead from the front. And obviously that can then start to, be infused into the team and particularly the new guys within that dressing room.
Yeah, when you're talking about this sort of stuff, when it comes to mentality and, as John says about coming from behind and all that, and, fighting back from going 1-0 down, to use another klaxon, we've heard the phrase, we never stop, and under Ange, we truly never stopped. We always sort of fought to the last minute. The amount of last minute winners that we scored was, up there with Gordon Strachan, I think. And that seems to have totally disappeared. Once you go 1-0 down, once the game goes a bit stale, you don't really have any belief, and you can feel it in the stands that there isn't really any belief that the squad's going to fight back. And, we've seen it against Kilmarnock in December, and I think we've seen it again at the weekend. There's such a stark drop-off in the second half of games, just sort of out of the blue. The team just totally falls apart. And, it's hard to say whether it actually happened on the pitch, but certainly in the stands against Rangers, after they scored to make it 2-1 in the Derby game, and you had that 9 minutes added time or whatever it was, there was such a nervousness about the team. We used to have such belief and such confidence, both when Brendan was here first time round and under Ange last season. It almost, we might not have went invincible, but you felt invincible most of the time, and that seems to have gone now. And as much as anything tonight, we need to get that momentum back and that winning feeling. I think it's all well and good saying that you need to go out and win the game, but I think we need to now go out and start winning well to give confidence to both the players and the fans. Because I think at the start of the COVID season, when we lost the league, we were winning games and picking up lots of points, but there was never really any confidence because we weren't playing that well. And I think that's something that the manager needs to change. I don't think you can blame the recruitment of the board for that. I think that's on the managers and the players to give fans the belief and give players the belief. And, maybe John's right, maybe it is a change in formation. I mean, it's a travesty what's happened to Kyogo this season. The fact that we can't seem to get win games at all, something needs to change tactically there. So I think that is a question for Rodgers, and we're obviously paying him the big money. He's a top class manager, so I think he needs to find the answers. And as much as it's about results in the next 14 games, I think it's about performance as well. Because even if we win the league, we won't have confidence in the side and confidence going into next season.
No, you're right. I think the performances feed that confidence, doesn't it? John, I'm going to ask you this. By the way, if you do have any questions for myself, Patrick McGilp or John Hughes, ask them in the comment section. And depending on how hard hitting they are, we'll be happy to answer them. Here's the first one.
Can I just what Belfast gig?
I've got a wee gig this Friday with Simon Donnelly and Jackie. We're going over to Belfast. Paddy's going to be there, and he's asking if you're going to join us.
Oh, I didn't know there was a Belfast gig on.
I think, Paddy, what John is saying is that he's not been invited yet, but, you know, this is the invitation. It's not one of the ones, John, where it's like, oh, you can come if you want after the event.
Well, we're supposed to be doing something Valentine's Day on Saturday. We've changed those plans a multitude of times. It looks like we'll have to change them again. If there's any way to find myself in Belfast, I absolutely will. I genuinely wasn't aware of that. I now need to
Valentine's Day. You got me worried there. I had to check what date it was on Friday because I'm not even going to be in the house.
Well, I know you've got until next Wednesday or something, but I'm now going to need to go and backtrack on a lot of things I've said about the weekend. So, thanks very much for the heads up. Far too late, but I will. What was I going to say? Paul in the comments there was saying, don't mention Ange. It's like mentioning your ex's name at the most inopportune moment. When you're talking to a man who went on holiday with someone and referred to her by his ex-wife's name multiple times, and that was such a good holiday. So I am going to bring up Ange again. What we had with Ange, and I said it at the time, and what has become just so absolutely, it's made it absolutely set in stone is Ange was an absolute one-off, and it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to us that we fell backside backwards, as they say, into that signing. Because I don't think Eddie Howe could have done it. I don't think Rodgers could have done it. I think it was a unique and incredibly unique set of circumstances where we had a coach who's a visionary, really, and as much as he has a clear vision, he brought clarity, he brought reliance on system, he brought players to fit the system, not just players for, generic or, just, that guy's a decent player, we'll get him in somewhere. He was very, very clear on how he wanted to play the game, as we saw. And the end result of that was the board loved him because he was buying excellent players over the first two windows for peanuts, all of whom made, nearly all of whom made massive impacts. Unfortunately, at the time, and this is what's become apparent now, it looked like this was a new dynamic between the manager and the chief executive and so on. It was just all about Ange. And the board were happy to go along with it because he wasn't spending piles of money. Most of these guys cost peanuts, and they were absolutely sensational. So he had the board's trust immediately with that. I don't think we're ever going to see that again. Unfortunately, it was a wee break in what has been a very long and tedious, train of the same old. Yeah. Now we're back. We're back to that same old. So what we lack in the team at the moment is vision, is clarity in terms of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. Is a reliance on the system or the wrong system. We lack dynamism, we lack speed, we lack focus. And I don't think we have the players to play the system. I don't know how many months we've been saying that for since the start of the season almost. We're relying on wingers, and we don't have any wingers. Or any decent wingers. So of the quality that we're creating all those chances before. So there's a lot at play at the moment. We can't do anything about what happened off the pitch now. But I don't think that should give anybody a free pass. I don't think it should mean we don't talk about it. I don't think it means we shouldn't protest about it. It's almost equally frustrating what's happening on the pitch, because should those players be good enough to put away teams who have a fraction of our resources? Yes, of course they should. And for me at the moment, the manager is not stepping up. And I said before this window started that we wouldn't sign anyone, and the manager's going to have to step up. It's going to have to be all about Brendan Rodgers to change the way that we're playing, because I didn't expect us to be saved in that window. So, that's why I'm back to it was the tricky games, because we don't know. And as Patrick pointed out earlier, when was the last time we put two good halves together? So it's so inconsistent. It's not inconsistent from game to game. It's inconsistent within the game.
Yeah.
We just can't keep our foot on anyone's throat for any length of time. We either don't start well or we don't finish well. But, one way or another. Sometimes we don't do either. But it's one or the other. So it's very frustrating at the moment. It's incredibly frustrating what's happened off the field, and incredibly frustrating what's happening on the field. And we, the manager, for that sort of money and the reputation he comes back with, he absolutely needs to step up. And there's another, and I've been over my time here, I do apologise, lads, but there's one thing I just wanted to say about. I was in a conversation with someone who is a friend of Peter Lawwell's, has lunch with him every week. And we were sending messages back and forward. And basically, the view from that side of the camp is just entirely different. Entirely different. You can't protest because it affects the team. This particular person has written, loads of books about, the players, and he said, the protests do affect the players, even if they say that they don't. And I'm like, yeah, but most of those protests happened as a result of, us being shocking on the pitch, and therefore you can understand why the players were affected by that. At the same time, you cannot have it both ways. We're either a wee club and everything is treated as a team or a family or a unit, and you don't give that guy a hard time, it might affect their morale or whatever. You either have that or you have a PLC. You can't have it both ways. You cannot not criticise the board because, he's a nice lad, good guys and all the rest. I've said on here multiple times they are good guys, but you cannot not criticise them. They are PLC executives, right? This is not going down to the club and, getting in there as an under-16s coach and going, come on, lads, and arms round the shoulder, and we can do this. That's for the pitch. That's Rodgers. That's his job. So, and when he's talking about collective responsibility, no, I'm sorry, Brendan. You might have collective responsibility, but this is a PLC. So you have collective responsibility in the team, and on the pitch, you are the team. You all have to win and lose as a team. Off the pitch, there is accountability. There must be accountability in a PLC. This is not a mum and pop operation where it's just like, oh, come on, lads, we did our best in that window. No, it's a PLC. You are an executive getting paid almost £1 million a year in some cases, or more. What was Lawwell's big takeout of it one season was 3.2 million or something like that. These pension kids. And it's just like, oh no, the boy did his best and their supporters and all the rest of it. No, absolutely not. And we must be able to separate those two things. The team gets full support. No question of that. The team gets full support. The board, on the other hand, you're a PLC. And I'm sorry, I'm not here to wave my PLC scarf.
No, John, you're spot on. And when you get snippets of information in relation to the kind of attitudes and the outlook of the club or the board, and it is a polar opposite to how the fans are feeling, that obviously it absolutely frightens me, Patrick, because the word protest, as John was saying there, I'm now thinking, how do you do that? How do you protest? Because they are sitting there thinking, but we spent 22 million this year, we've invested in the team. I mean, Brendan's doing a great job, and all this kind of stuff. They are so far away from reality. It's unbelievable. And if you question them, like I said before, you question them on recruitment. What do you know about recruitment, Paul? No, a great deal. But I know when you spend £22 million, you don't have a left back other than Bernabe to go up and play in Pittodrie, that the recruitment's not right. I know that much about football. So, John, that kind of thing frightens the life out of me, but it doesn't surprise me. There is a absolute, for me, there's a group of fans who will never criticise Celtic. And every time we do, either on here or on social media, they come to the defence of the boards. They come to the defence of the board, right? And it's just, get behind the team. And this is the mantra, Patrick, get behind the team. Well, of course we support Celtic. I want every single player in a Celtic jersey to do well. But if they play rubbish, or if we lose a game, or if we throw away an 8-point lead, you've got to question it. You've got to do it early enough, Patrick. You can't wait until the horse is bolted. Because a lot of people, if you just blindly say, just support the team, the horse is gone, you've lost the league, and it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can talk about the 21-22 million investment in the squad, but it's a net spend of something like minus 8 or 9 million. And that was at a point in the summer when you had 72 million cash in bank. Why are we trying to make a £9 million profit when the squad needs upgrading, when you've got all this money sitting? Now, you can talk about having a buffer for not getting in the Champions League, but why even think like that? Why conjure up some scenario where in 15 months' time you might be in the Europa League? Why not just go out and invest in the squad? We're investing in this Babafield thing. That will take maybe 12 months to 18 months, spend 15 to 20 million on that. Is that really going to be of benefit to the club? And no doubt in the long term it probably will, but when you look at the youth setup over the last 10 to 15 years, you can maybe name 5 players that have came through and benefited Celtic. Obviously, Tierney's made us a bunch of money as well. The women's team, obviously, that's brilliant. That's a growing sort of element of the sport. The last year and a half, 2 years, it's been exploding sort of in the UK anyway. So that's definitely necessary. But there's question marks whether it's even you're even going to be able to play games at this facility at UEFA matches due to, I think it's access roads or something. So the team's there. It needs investment. We're going for a lucrative new Champions League pot of 55 million, and you're trying to make 9 million on transfers. It just doesn't make any sense. And there is obviously a balance to be struck. If we go out and smash Hibs 5-0 tonight and then win 3-0 at St Mirren at the weekend, do you really want to be singing "Sack the Board" against Kilmarnock on the 17th of February? Because as much as they're not doing their jobs and as much as we're not gambling, we are gambling, sorry, with the league title, there has to be some sort of acknowledgement that the preparation and the decision making this season has been incredibly poor. And as we've just spoke about, half of that is with Rodgers. The way the team's playing, the formation, the tactics. Obviously, that sits with the team and the manager. But the recruitment element, we spoke about it for weeks on here, all throughout the transfer window, has been shocking. The lack of investment has been shocking. And maybe it does get to the players. I've no doubt when they were turning up outside Celtic Park, 3.5 years ago, and were throwing fences and stuff, that probably did shake the players a little. But when the team isn't doing well, you spoke about the pressure and the expectation. If we are not at the absolute peak of Scottish football with the resources that we have and the head start that we have, then there has to be massive questions, and players need to expect that coming up here. As you say, people come up from England, they think they're going to walk it, and fair enough, they might have played at a certain level for a number of years, but the expectation at Celtic is, dropping points of any kind is a total disaster. And I think players, manager, board members need to realise that.
Yeah, you're spot on. Today it's the birthday of Mike Nawrocki and another real fans' favourite, Diego Laxalt. And I'm just really worried about the social media guy at Celtic, the guy or girl who needs to wish Diego a happy birthday. Listen, it's not a new phenomenon, the way that we spraff cash down the gutter, because I was having a wee look here just last night and I knew it was pretty bad, but I didn't think it was as bad as this. We've spent let's get the figure here, 56 million quid in the last 12 years. It is last 12 seasons, not including this season, on players who have never played 50 games for the club. And it's just horrific because it's sometimes difficult to gauge what was at value for money. Were they a good signing? Were they a flop? But I think if you've not played 50 games for the football club and you've signed for Celtic on big money, then, I'm pretty confident to say that you've not made it. And this goes back to Daryl Murphy, 800 grand, Efran Juarez, 3 million, through the likes of Bangura at 2.2, Balde, remember him? Amido, 1.8, Dirk Borigter, 2 million, Pukki at 2.4, it goes on and on, Skepovic, Chiefche, Allen, Gamboa, Kouassi, Compere, Morgan, Musonda, £2 million loan fee, Jack Hendry, 1.5 million, Bayou, 2 million quid, Shved, Luca Connell, Bolingoli, Klamala, Sorrow, Barkas, Ayeti, Duffy, Laxalt and Kenny, big loan fees on them, Liam Shaw, Urigide, Ediguchi, Kenny, Bernabe, Haksabanovic, there's 56 million quid. What did we get back for it, John? What did we get back for that 56 million pounds? I mean, that is horrific recruitment. There's no other word for it. It's actually disgraceful that you can do it over a period of time, and every so often, right, you get a success. So it makes it almost all right. Or you get that anomaly when Ange comes in. You know, and as you say, it was an absolute, you know, you fell in the river, you came out with 2 trouts in your pockets with Ange. Absolute luck. It was a lucky stroke, it really was. But John, that shows you that it's not a new phenomenon. This club have been wasting money for a long, long time in the transfer market.
Yeah, what did they say? It's a reverting to mean. So basically, we're just back to where we were after the Ange brief respite. We've got guys now, and we have had guys through all that period who are making decisions. They are completely risk averse. They are not entrepreneurs. They are not businessmen. They are functionaries. Those are the guys running the club. Dermot Desmond doesn't run the club. Dermot Desmond flies in from the Gulf every 6 months and drops. I mean, like, yeah, as people have been pointing out, I think, you know, he dropped in Rodgers. That was pure Dermot Desmond, and then just leaves. And is he backing him? Is he making sure he gets the support he wants? I doubt very much he's had a conversation with him, other than, you know, I hope you're doing well. He's just not that guy, you know, that he's not involved on a day-to-day basis. This is just one of his toys, one of his many toys. So his boy's on the board, and I'm sure he's trying to carve out a niche for himself, so he'll not be running to daddy every 5 minutes either. So, you know, we have a situation where we have interference at that level from the only person who actually has a record as a businessman and an entrepreneur, but he is not on a daily basis involved. We've had Peter Lawwell for how many long years. It seemed like a couple of centuries there. You know, I think it was Brother Wilfred, then Peter Lawwell. I don't know. But you know, all the time he was there, it was just the managed decline that we always spoke about, and that's what it's been. It's been managed decline, and went from the point we were spending too much money under the Martin O'Neill era, and that's fine. But from that point on, it's been managed decline, and you know, Ange was a really bright spot in that period, but now we're just back to it. So, you know, until we see some sort of change at the board level, then this is just going to carry on as is. Because I say they're first and foremost, they're not functionary. They are functionaries, and they're just focused on bonuses. They're focused on the money. That's all they're focused about. They're not thinking about, you know, they don't have the vision to say, well, listen, if we get into the Champions League, you know, we could risk that. What's our risk parameters? We could do this, we could do that. You know, potentially what could we win out of this? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the facts. We have this money. We're only going to spend this much money. We're not taking into account things that might happen unless those things are negative because they're risk averse, right? So we might not qualify for the Champions League. That's fine. That's what you said. That's why you're storing up the money. But what if we do? Did you think about that? Where's the opposite of that? Where is the case for we might qualify for the Champions League? We might get through a group stage. We might win more than a couple of games. And as I pointed out on here before, winning 2 wins in the Champions League is a financial equivalent of winning a treble, right? So I do not understand. It's just this such an insular viewpoint. You know, they cannot see past the end of their own noses. You know, it's unbelievable. Anyway, I'm going to try and talk about some football at some point because these people are just driving me nuts. The manager's not doing much better, to be fair. But it's you know, the track record recruitment's there for everyone to see. It's a shambles, and it has been a shambles with one exception. So, you know, we have to rely on the people who are qualified and are in jobs are qualified to do. And Brendan Rodgers is in, you know, all of the people at the top of the tree. You might argue that he is the only one that's actually qualified to do the job that he's in. You know, Michael Nicholson was never a CEO, never put up for the CEO position. Peter Lawwell was just the chief accountant. You know, the guys on the board, don't even ask me what most of them did, because it was like 2 decades since they did anything. So Mark Lawwell's not qualified. Their head scout isn't qualified. So you can argue that Brendan Rodgers is the only one that is qualified, and he is going to have to turn this around because, unfortunately, he's responsible for the product on the pitch, and the product on the pitch has been incredibly poor. Now, at least 50% of that, if not more, is down to this lack of support he's had. But he has to deal with it. It's his job to deal with it. If it was easy, you wouldn't be getting paid $3.5 million.
No, this is the thing, John, and you're talking about Gordon Strachan's laddie, I'm guessing, when you go to the scouting. He is good at selling Pringle jerseys, though, Patrick. That is the most important thing about scouting, obviously. I was reading an interesting tweet this morning from inside the SPFL. Celtic's league record at Easter Road, in general, since Hibs got promoted back in 2017, is abysmal. Only guy who's won there is Ange. Sorry, there's another big Claxon moment there. And even he only had a 50% win rate at Easter Road. Never understood why they've struggled to perform there. In the last 12 games, Patrick, we have won 2. I'm sorry to be tempering everybody's enthusiasm for tonight. We've drawn 7, we've lost 3. Right. How do we sort it tonight? Let's talk about the football. Patrick McGough, we've got a rotten record at Easter Road. How do we sort it tonight? Brendan's never won here.
Well, I suppose if you take it in probability terms, we're due a win, really, aren't we? If you look at it that way, if you try to be positive.
Well recovered, Patrick. Well recovered.
There says a very poor gambler.
You're right. You're absolutely spot on. No, I mean, we are better, and they were an awful run. I mean, any team, was it 3-0 in the first half? St Mirren won. Was it 4? I can't really remember. But I mean, they battered them. And you know, when they came to Celtic Park, I mean, we didn't, from memory, we didn't even play that well, and we beat them 4-1 just because of how open they play. And the one goal that they did score, that was a Nat Phillips special. The boy turned him inside out and then done the exact same trick 5 minutes later and actually scored. So, you know, we put 4 goals by them with ease. I'd like to think we'll be able to do the same again because they don't have the players to play that way. And they've obviously played that way against St Mirren if St Mirren can batter the goals by them. So, you know, we said the same about Aberdeen. Poor side, should win comfortably. Didn't. But, you know, we need a reaction. And it comes back to the mentality. I mean, I don't hate, but, you know, I'm not a big fan of talking about sort of intangibles. It's like mentality and team spirit. I think it's hard to measure stuff like that. You know, we've got a better squad and a better manager. We should be winning the game, but if we can bounce back and we can see the mentality's right, we can see the football's right, the tactics are right, it gives us a chance to really kick on. And I think we all thought we were going to kick on after those 4 wins just before the winter break. And, you know, 6 wins in a draw isn't the worst record in the world, but the performances the last 2 games have been so poor, especially in the second half. So just to come back to that, really, you know, we need an absolute belter of a performance. I think we need to put 3 or 4 by them, if I'm being honest, keep a clean sheet, because, you know, for one, that record's terrible. The momentum right now, I hate to say it, is, you know, with the other side of the city, and we need to fix the mistakes. And with the window shut, it's up to Brendan, really, and I'm sure Brendan will want to amend his record at Easter Road as well.
Aye, definitely. I mean, you've mentioned a couple of teams there, for example, St Mirren, who will be meeting in the Scottish. You look at a scenario there where you get a gaffer going in and having to just deal with what he's got, you know what I mean, and pull the absolute maximum from players that he's got. And that is what I'm looking at right now with Brendan. You've got much better quality than anybody else in the league. Surely you can get a tune out of this team. Really keen to hear your thoughts. Doogie Sharp, welcome to the show. You are watching us on the YouTube. I think we can all agree that the board and recruitment team need a drastic shake-up. And before I go back to the football, John, I'm just, I'm really aware of the fact that things have changed so much since the last big shake-up, which was kind of fan-infused, with Celts for Change and obviously working hand in hand with Fergus McCann's group back in the day, the street movement. What can we do now? Because you think about back then, where you had Celts for Change, with the great guys that pulled everything together, word of mouth, adverts in newspapers, through the pages of fanzines that came out once a month. It's so much easier now to get the word out, John, but it seems harder to pull everybody together.
Yes, because, again, it's difficult to have a dominant voice amongst the fan groups simply because, there are a lot of fans with a lot of different opinions, and it's, again, what we're really talking about is pushing on. We're not talking about going out of existence. What we're talking about is lack of ambition. What we're talking about is lack of vision. What we're talking about is nepotism. What we're talking about is corporate cronyism. These are things that it's very difficult to formulate a proper protest around in terms of, have everyone behind it. Because you're not going to get it, because people will say, well, we've won 17 out of the last 22 trophies, whatever it is, because that's exactly what the Lowell fans say. And then they hark back to the old days, which has got nothing to do with anything, given how dominant we've been for the last couple of decades. So, it's, in terms of what we can do, the problem is when you encounter like a proper businessman like Fergus McCann, for instance, he instituted the season books. So you can't even stay away without having already given them your money, right? And if you don't take up your season books, apparently there's 10,000 in the background. Let's assume it was even half of that. Those tickets will still be sold. And when you talk about, when I ever see it on my Twitter, if someone says I'm giving up my season book, within 3 replies, someone's saying, go on then, I'll take it. And so you're not going to get that level of unity in the protests, and the board rely on that. They only have to keep us that the whole one step ahead of Rangers thing. That's really all they have to do to keep their jobs. So we can moan about Europe as much as we want, but as long as the club's not going bust and we're winning silverware every now and then, that'll keep most people happy. Because most people are, want to support the team. It's a major part of their lives. They're there all the time, and it's too much a big part of their lives to sacrifice on the back of a dispute about the board, and they just won't do it. So even if you could, let's just say you had unity, unless you're literally going to, leave the ground with a 15,000 people in it, that's not going to make any difference anyway. And as I said on here before, the reality is Desmond's not going to make any changes. There is cronies, there is people he's put in place. If he doesn't make any changes, the board won't change. Lowell's not going to step down. 70 grand a year, it's basically a nice wee add-on to his pension. What you get, Mike Nicholson's not going to sack himself. You can't even say that he's done he's not even, has he done a bad job? How much of this is down to the CEO? Because, again, I think the problem is Lowell's influence when he came back has stymied anything that Mike Nicholson might have wanted to do. So we're never going to know, because he is now tied in with Lowell indefinitely. But it's the appointing of people completely unqualified in positions of real responsibility. That's the main problem. So in terms of what people can do, we all know that. We had this discussion before. You can try and hit the club financially, and good luck to you doing that. But unless it's a coordinated effort, it's a waste of time. And I'm not suggesting you give up. And I've had people saying to me before, oh, I don't believe that. If we get, people have actually been messaging me on Twitter, if we get behind the right group of people, we can do this, we can do that, we can achieve this. Maybe you believe that, and maybe it's true. I don't believe it, because I just don't think you will get enough people who care. because you have to really care about stuff like this, because you have to make sacrifices. One of the sacrifices might be not watching Celtic, and that's not a sacrifice that most people are prepared to make.
No, this is the thing, John, because I remember a discussion last week about breaking Dermot Desmond's toy. I'm not prepared to not see my football team. Absolutely not. And I think there's other ways. You think about the way that the Celtic fan base kind of came together. Remember back in 2021, it was now Bernard Higgins was about to be appointed at Celtic, Patrick. And there was a real coming together, really, because it was quite obviously that, no one wanted him at the football club. And I do remember at the time, even if you're just talking about fan media now, I was talking about back in the day, the fanzines got a massive pile right in front of me here. The fan media groups all came together as well to ensure that there was a joint statement made to the club, so that they knew that obviously some of the fan media channels got a huge influence. I can only speak about Acsom. I know that every single month, if you look at the average viewership, and that's on every platform, not just on YouTube, but on the audio platforms, Acsom can get anything between 1.75 million to 2 million people tuning in on a monthly basis, which is huge. It's absolutely sensational. And you can get a word across there, but it's a narrative. And some people don't like to follow a narrative. If you don't agree, you don't agree. And I do think that there's other chat around what the club, what the fans could do, Patrick, and trying to have some kind of representation on the board so that you're closer to actually being able to speak to them and give them a different narrative and a different view. And I know the Celtic Trust have been trying to gather shares to do that. Is it 5% they're trying to gather in terms of a shareholding so that they can maybe even call an EGM, an extraordinary general meeting? Do you think having a voice on the board is something that we can do as Celtic fans? Do you think it would make a blind bit of difference?
I think it would. I think it definitely would. I mean, I'm not sure how far away they are from a 5% shareholding. I'm guessing it's probably a fair bit away, but I think what they're asking for is I think there's something like 30% or 20% of individual shareholders sort of holding small amounts of shares and are wanting to club together. And I think that's probably possible. I'm not a member of the Celtic Trust. I'm not entirely sure how it works. I don't have any shares. So, the specifics I can't talk about. But having fan representation, both sort of as a group, as shareholders, is obviously quite important to be able to call those meetings and hold board members to account. But also, I believe in Germany they have workers on some of their boards. I'm sure Mercedes or something like that. I'm not familiar with the specifics, but to have actual season ticket holders, fans, as part of the board, I think would be quite a good idea. And to have some sort of cap, because, I mean, I think you've spoken about it at length, the fact that if you combine Brian Wilson and Tom Allison together, you get 40 years on that board. And what have those two guys actually contributed? To remove Tom Allison would actually be a massive benefit, because he owns, I think it's 3.5% of Celtic. So if the fans could buy that, I think it works out at £150 a season ticket holder to buy his shares off him. And then, he's been there since 2001. What has he really done? So to get someone like that out of the club would be a massive benefit to some sort of fan movement, in my opinion. And to know about what's going on in the inner workings of the club. I mean, we don't know how much this Barrafield redevelopment is going to cost, how much of the 72 million we're setting aside for that. We don't know how much we're spending on transfers, really, because they never released the figure. The transparency element around the club for me is a big issue as well, because we don't really know what the long-term plan is. It seems to be qualify for the Champions League, make no effort to compete in the Champions League, and hoover up as many Scottish trophies as possible, which, as John has pointed out, is totally pointless, because financially, I mean, you're collecting trophies, which is lovely. I mean, it's brilliant to win a treble, but to win 2 games in the Champions League makes more financial sense. And I think, everyone and their dog knows that the future of football is in these sort of European leagues, these super leagues, and Celtic are going to have to face that reality very soon. And just to touch on the sort of protest and giving up your season ticket, I think it'll. I mean, I'm not sure. We could end up in the Europa League next season, but certainly in terms of the Champions League, I think there's a risk of apathy and when it comes to selling 4-match packages and season tickets, because it's going to get to a stage where, I mean, if our aim is to just be there and not bother competing, how many people are actually going to pay £200 to turn up to Celtic Park and watch us lose every single year?
Yeah.
I mean, people are just going to not bother. And when it comes to the league title, if it's just the same formula year after year, are people going to pay hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds to watch the same old dross? So you might end up, people giving up their season tickets by accident. That 10,000 waiting list sort of slowly dwindling. But I'm not. Don't have a crystal ball, or else I would be a much more successful gambler, as John pointed out earlier. But it starts with tonight. It starts with the performance. It starts with a solid win, and looking towards the recruitment in the summer. It obviously has to be better, and I think whether it's the trust, whether it's shareholders coming together, whether it's protests, something obviously need to change, certainly in the recruitment. And as much as it might be difficult with Desmond not selling up, something has to change at board level as well, because you can't have these guys sitting there for 20, 25 years, not contributing, holding the club back and bringing absolutely no ideas to the table.
No creativity.
The one thing I would say is when people are talking about we can't protest is all that we have, because we cannot force change. There's nothing we can do to actually force a change as things stand at the moment. So the only thing you can do is embarrass certain people into maybe, sacking certain other people and hopefully make a change that way. But that's all the power that we have. So we must protest if we are not happy.
Yeah, I agree with you. We will talk about the football for anybody who is dying to talk about, the hoodoo at Easter Road.
One last thing. Barrowfield's supposed to be 10 million at least. Patrick, that's what we're being told. That's the rumour anyway from the Lowell camp. You're talking about, 10 million at least, which is, I don't have anything against infrastructure projects, and that's as good an idea as any. I'm not sure what our return is going to be on a project like that. Could you not have them all training at Lennoxtown and have Barrowfield sold for houses and make 50 million out of it? I don't know. But as you pointed out, what's our return on that investment-wise? Because the academy itself, without Kieran Tierney, hasn't even broken even over the last 20-odd years. I think I went back to 1998. Yeah. Without Tierney's sale, I haven't even broken even. It's difficult to say. Obviously, we want to be, when Michael Nicholson's talking about world-class, is that what he's talking about? World-class training facilities, world-class youth academy, all of that. That might well pay dividends in the future. We might well get more people coming to the club. So 10 million out of that 70 million, is that unrealistic or a bad idea? I don't know. Infrastructure usually pays off in the end, but it's definitely a long-term ambition. But yeah, what was that you wanted to say about football, Paul John?
Yeah, what I would say actually, 1,300 live on this Wednesday afternoon is a tremendous turnout for the Acsom Bulletin. And what you'll get is you'll get everything. You'll get everything from whether or not we like the jersey, right down to who should be running the football club. There's an interesting, again, I've got all the literature in front of me there. When Dermot Desmond came to Celtic, we did a brief interview actually with Willie Hockey back in October. I never knew that it was Willie that brought Dermot Desmond to the table. And then obviously the investment has been made. People in the comment section going about what did they bring to the club. There has been investment, obviously, at some point from Dermot Desmond, but he does an interview with the Celtic view. I'm going to dig into it, but he's talking about making sure Celtic are bigger than Manchester United. That was his opening salvo. I'm going to have a look at his objectives back then and see how many of them have been fulfilled. We will be talking about tonight's game. My Ball protests will be shown at the end of the season with season ticket sales. But I think, as John says, there is always somebody else there to step in and take that season ticket. Brandon Warren, Bernabe, let's start talking about the football. Shouldn't be a start today for left back. Also, I feel the formation should be 3-5-2, shake up the way we play. But Patrick, yesterday we were talking about 3-5-2. I like the idea of it, but I think if we were going to do it, we would have done it against Buckie Thistle and Ross County to see how it works. Moving into the Aberdeen, Hibs and St Mirren games, I can't see us changing in terms of the shape over the next couple of weeks. What's your thoughts?
No, I think we'd have to drop a lot more points for that to be the case. If there was going to be any sort of experiment, I think the comment is right there. That would have happened against Buckie Thistle. Not to be disrespectful, but I think we were going to win that game anyway, just by how much. So to test out a new formation would have been the perfect time. Away to Hibs, probably stick with what he knows. Again, it's just really about the performance and the mentality. I mean, we've turned up this season before. We know how to play football. I mean, it's quite obvious. I think back to probably Tynecastle back in October. Maybe the first half against Atletico Madrid. We know how to play really well and entertain. It's just about actually doing it, and it seems. Don't know. It's hard to pinpoint really. Maybe Atletico away. Maybe the draw with Motherwell at home. It's hard to pinpoint where it's gone wrong. The inconsistencies are just littered throughout the season. As I said earlier, this is a team. Obviously, the squad isn't as good as ours. The manager isn't as good as ours. They play an open system. It's just really about getting into that final third and finding Kyogo, because we've not been able to do that all season. Whether we do that with 3-5-2, going forward, that might be the answer. I'm not a big fan of 3 at the back after the beginning of the COVID season. I just don't think we have the players for it, especially with Rodgers being so dependent on wingers. I know we don't have very many good ones at the moment, but I don't think Brendan Rodgers will go for that. I think we could go back to the 4-2-3-1 that he played the first time he was here. That seemed to give us joy for those 2.5 years. It could be the players that we have that he has at his disposal that we're sticking with the 4-3-3. It certainly worked for Ange, but it doesn't seem to be working for us. And we're getting the best out of some players, but not others. So I think maybe in the summer he needs to look at changing it, and we need to look at bringing in, believe it or not, more wingers. Even though we have about 50 million, we need to find some good ones, certainly in the right wing. But I don't think we'll see a change of formation this season. Not so late on. I mean, we've picked up, as much as we're sort of struggling now and we're levelling points with Rangers. We've been not bad at picking up points, and it has worked obviously in large spells. It's just the inconsistencies that we need to iron out, and we need to start going on a run. But I mean, to answer the question, no, I don't think we'll see a 3-5-2. I don't think managers these days are big fans of playing 2 strikers unless they're going for a goal in the last 20 minutes. So I think we'll be sticking with 4-3-3 certainly for this season.
I agree with you. I'm not saying we should, but I do agree with that. And I think at the weekend there we got another sight of Nicholas Kuhn, John, and we've seen our first example of what Adam Ida can bring to the table. And I do think that when Ida came on, I thought Kyogo sprung into life. I thought he looked better with 2 up top, like Patrick says, when we're kind of chasing the points, chasing the game. What do you make of the January signings from what you're seeing? I know it's just been cameo appearances so far, John.
Kuhn has a real touch of the Mikey Johnsons about him. He actually does look very similar.
That is a testimonial and a half. Are we going to be talking about Kuhn in 7 years, saying, this is the moment, the last chance saloon?
But he actually does play a lot like him in certain respects. Even that goal, when he was cutting across, there was a lot of them in the Mikey Johnsons about that. Let's hope it turns out slightly more positively. Ida had a nice touch. And, again, anything that takes defenders away from Kyogo is going to be a benefit. That's why I think, that's why I do like the idea of 3-5-2. And I've said all year we should be playing 3-5-2. And I don't understand why we persist when we don't have any wingers. 4-2-3-1, well, it depends who's in the 3, doesn't it? And is it going to be the 2 wingers in Ida behind Kyogo, and then you're going to be short in midfield, and so it depends who's in that 3. But we in my view, we need to do something because we need to. It's stale and stale is a big word, here, because it feels stale, it looks stale. Nothing is changing. The beauty of what our ex Ange did. God bless him. Yeah, still love that guy. Not over it. But the beauty of what he did was he draw teams out. So effectively, we have scales. So we have scales pushing up to almost, well into their half, right? And then expecting the centre half to pull out some sort of, Baggio-esque, or Messi-esque pass into, 20-odd players all standing within, 15 yards. Where's the space ever going to be? As soon as I see the centre halves pushing up beyond the halfway line, you're thinking this is just not going to work, because there's no space. It doesn't matter how good you are if you can't find space. So it requires miracles, really, when you get that tight. So, in my view, if we're going to keep playing this way, we have to be braver on the ball. We have to let them come on to us, and we have to beat the press. And if they're not going to play with a press at all, then fair enough. But that never happened previously when we were doing that, because it's their instinct to press you to some degree to try and force a mistake. But we have to be brave enough to let them try that, and confident enough in ourselves that we can beat the press and therefore create space. We can't. There is no space at the moment. That's why it just seems so repetitive. You're just doing the horseshoe from side to side to side to side, and there's nothing happening because we've got guys that can't, take on a man and hit the line, playing on either wing. So if you can't get past them that way, you're never going to get past them. And even if you can get past them that way, that is a low percentage ball. Because if you're not cutting back to someone specific, if you're just lumping it into the middle, maybe that's where Ida will help. But, it's a low percentage ball. Unless it's the front post with a Kyogo coming on it, as we've seen so many times before, then, most defences are happy to defend that, sort of ball. So, and you can't get through the middle. There's just no space through the middle at all. So something needs to change, excuse me, either systemically or personnel-wise or managers' instructions. We'll play the same idea, but just let them come on to us. There has to be some way that we can draw them out.
Yeah, look how we were drawn in, John, for the goal against Aberdeen at the weekend. And then we're so on the back foot that we're never recovering from that. I know that I've been very critical about just about everybody defensively in that move. But the way Aberdeen did that, and let's be honest, they did it again last night, didn't they? It was just a big hoof up the park. Miovski got onto the end of it. We've got Kyogo that can get on the end of these balls, but we're never getting the defence on the back foot. Never. Like you say, it's just too languid, the style, it's too slow, it's predictable. We're very easy to play against at the moment. And a lot of the defences that are finding it easy for us to play against are not great defenders. You're talking Livingston, Motherwell, Ross County, Dundee. These teams are not great football teams, but they're set up and they've got a really rigid defensive shape and they work on it all week. Nick Montgomery needs points as well. Let's not forget that. Tonight, Patrick, Lewis Palmer, I've called him a curious case, Lewis Palmer, because I think we have seen, it's easy to forget, we have seen what he can bring to the table positively. I was looking at this morning, a goal or assist every 94 minutes for Celtic, scored 2 goals in the Champions League. But for me, defensively brings nothing to the table, nothing whatsoever. He disappears in games, he's inconsistent, he's undisciplined. So there's pros and cons to the guy. But I just think in recent weeks he's not shown enough and have made us fit for tonight. For me, Palmer gets dropped. I don't think we've done that to him yet. I think he needs a rocket. Can you see Brendan doing that tonight?
I actually can, because he's not really shown anything since we've come back. He's played well in the Champions League, as he pointed out, but really since that penalty against Feyenoord, he's not done much. Not done much at all. I think scunnered is probably the best word to describe my feelings towards the wingers at the club at the moment. None of them have been a standout this season, and you've seen that. You've ended up with Mikey Johnson and James Forrest and all that playing, and they should be nowhere near the team at this stage. And you've seen last season they were nowhere near the team, because it's absolute desperation stuff to be playing those guys. But Maeda, he's not my favourite player. I think he lacks quality on the ball. A lot of the crosses that he puts in end up in rosette, but he does a job. He presses, and they're trying to play out from the back with a squad that really shouldn't be playing out from the back. So I think Maeda and Kyogo pressing them could be an option. In terms of work rate, I think Abada's work rate is better than Palma. So you could see those two players as with Palma dropped. Both of them have been known to get goals. Abada, especially at the back post, and hopefully with the extra space we can find Kyogo. But again, it's just about the performance, really. Regardless of who the wingers are, I think if the wingers turn up, I think we'll play well and win comfortably. But it's just the consistency in performances that we've been missing this season. And Maeda's no exception to that. I think he's been poor in several games this season. But not to make sweeping generalisations, but I think there's been a problem in British football with South American signings. A lot of them, both in England. I think you've seen it at Man United. You've seen it with Bernabei. Morelos is a big obvious case. That I think sometimes the work rate and the attitude isn't there, because I think they see getting to Europe as an achievement. And once they get here, they become like Palma and think, oh, I'll end up at Real Madrid in a few years. And it really isn't the case. So again, I don't want to label an entire continent as lazy, but I think Maeda and Abada would say I know, pretty bad.
That generalisation. There's nothing wrong with that. Come on.
Well, I mean,
that's not going to get clipped, Patrick. Definitely not. No one's going to use that.
Oh God! Listen, if Palmer wants to prove me wrong and score a hat-trick tonight, I'd be more than happy. More than welcome. But no, Maeda and Abada, I think, would be my picks for tonight.
We don't exactly have a lot of choice here in reality, do we? Because Palma, as I said before, is a one-trick pony, and just if that trick doesn't come off in the game, you've got nothing really from him. Maeda doesn't offer anything creatively, but Bernabei, who probably play tonight, is a liability, and Maeda does offer defensive solidity, but more to the point, despite the fact we probably don't really need that defensive solidity tonight. More to the point, what he does do is he pressures inferior players into making mistakes. So, he might not be the most creative himself. We have seen if a chance are set up for him, he can take them. But what he does do is he puts us on the front foot with the pressure that he brings. So that's the kind of attitude we need, because we're not getting that elsewhere. So I would say Maeda for me and Kuhn. I think Abada's given up the ghost, to be perfectly honest. I think his time here is potentially done completely. I don't think, I see nothing from him at this point. So in terms of, it's really a choice for me between Palma, Maeda and Kuhn. And, it's not quite that straightforward, because, as I say, we maybe don't need Maeda's defensive solidity, but Palma's one trick might actually work. So I don't know. It's a difficult one. I would play Maeda and Kuhn.
No, you know what? I'm kind of going down that road myself. I keep thinking back to the first game at Easter Road this season. I thought Palma was really poor that day. That was maybe one of the first times I've looked at him and started questioning his some of his attributes, his application. And obviously comes from a nation who are known, Patrick, for being lazy and complacent. In fact, the whole continent, not just the nation. Jungle Lion, as bad as Celtic are, and as great as they think they are, Celtic are still top, but something needs to click or change from now on in. Yeah, we've got 14 league games. As Patrick says, you win all 14, it becomes a 100 points season. How likely that is, I do not know on this form, but we start tonight at Easter Road. Let us know in the comments section what you would do with the left back, the formation, and of course the wingers. How can we get the best out of Kyogo, and how you think the two new January recruits have fared so far in their cameos in the green and white hoops. Let us know in the comments section also how you think Celtic are going to do tonight. I'll be back half an hour before kickoff. Kickoff is, of course, at 8 o'clock tonight. for Hibernian against Celtic. All that's left for me to do is to thank you all for tuning in. 1,300 live. I feel loathed to cut you off when there's so many of you getting involved in the chat. Keep it coming. Thank you once again to Patrick McGilp and John Hughes for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Hail, hail.